Hello, and welcome to the CSIAC podcast. Today's episode will be talking about the state of cybersecurity education in both the collegiate and high school levels. Our guests, James Rice and Michael Weir, break down the current state of cybersecurity education, problems that they've noticed, where cybersecurity education is going in the future, and what students and professionals can do to best prepare themselves. As always, feel free to give us feedback on this episode below and suggest topics for future episodes. Please enjoy. I'm sitting here with
James Rice, cybersecurity analyst for CSIAC and cybersecurity faculty at Mohawk Valley Community College.
And I'm Michael Weir. I'm the director of the CSIAC, and I'm also a longtime cybersecurity person since about 1983, working in the field and trying to figure things out.
So I wanted to get both of you in the room to talk about this just because the varying perspectives would be great to just analyze the current state of cybersecurity education at a collegiate level and what the state of it is, because you get a varying experience from university to university and what they label as a quote-unquote cybersecurity degree. So just really quick, let's start with James. What would be your take on what cybersecurity education at a collegiate level is currently and what you see might be some issues with it?
So initially what it is, I think it's important to understand that varies is really the key word. What we've seen across many colleges and universities is, where did the cybersecurity program grow out of? It is most likely newer than the vast majority of other programs at the college. And we've seen them come out of areas such as criminal justice. We've seen them come out of policy. We've seen them come out of the STEM side, on the math science side. We've seen them come out of a traditional computer science program. And this birth, where the program comes from at the given university, very heavily influences the style, the nature, the flavor of education that students get. And just as you say, they might all have the word cybersecurity stamped on them, but that certainly does not mean that they're all getting the same education. Taking that a step further, that's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that cybersecurity, I often relate to the medical field. There's a variety of anywhere from entry-level positions to very technical positions or non-technical positions found in the industry. And so we do need a variety, but having some common understanding as to what type of education are we receiving and what are the emphasis going to be in your first year, in your second year, and your third year as you progress through. I think that there's a lot of improvement that can be made there across the board. Just to provide a little bit of stability to what's the end product, what's the goal that we're all working towards.
I'd go along with that. I'd say the current state is maturing, because it does have quite a bit to do with where you came from and where you're going to get. So the part of it for me that's most important is coming up with what was in 2010 an original idea called the science of cybersecurity, because it was so disparate and lots of people had different perspectives on what that elephant was. So the elephant could be one thing to one community, something else to another community, but to really make it into a science, you need a more rigor in the way it's presented and the way it's used in the field. You use the medical field as an exemplar, and the one I like to think of is the legal field, because you have both a due diligence for the general population to understand what laws are and what they mean, and then for professionals also to say, I know specifically about this. I do patent law, I do financial law, I do real estate law, things like that. So there's a community of skill sets that are beginning to be kind of coalesced around some frameworks, and I think that there are some good frameworks out there. Kind of started with the NIST cybersecurity framework. That was the first realistic, I'll say realistic and a little bit more global perspective on who does what to whom. So I think that aspect needs to come back into the education arena, because one of the thing that bothers me about the current state of affairs in engineering education, cybersecurity and engineering education, because it's kind of related, is that there's a little bit of confusion as to what do you teach and what do you not teach. Because if you cumulatively teach everything in cyber, there's no way you can do it, and there's no way that one person can do it. So there does have to be this segmentation, this partitioning into different skill levels, and figuring out at what age in terms of your baccalaureate or graduate process, and what level do you perform, and what's in each of those squares. That's an important thing.
So just to follow up with that, you're talking about having so many disparate ideas and so many paths that you can take, or specializations that you can take in the field of cybersecurity. What do you think that a cybersecurity curriculum at let's say an undergraduate level should consist of for the fundamentals of what that degree should consist of? What courses should be taught? Should you lean towards more of a criminal justice, or more of a math background, more of a computer science base? Thoughts?
My own thoughts are that there are fundamental computer science concepts that are part of cybersecurity. You cannot get away from them. So if you skip that part and immediately go to, I will incorrectly call it the frosting of cybersecurity, because that's what people tend to look at. The shiny stuff, the push the button and make the cybersecurity bombs go off and destroy the bad guys. That's at the level of tools, which is where things are currently kind of still headed. They're very tool-oriented versus foundation orientation towards cybersecurity. So I think there needs to be embedding of some of the of the computer science concepts across some of the areas that don't currently have that, because it's hard to tell. If you're interested in forensics, you may discover that it's forensics pointed in a particular direction versus cyber forensics, which is a different sort of a thing. But the concept should be embedded in there. So I think it's important to get away from the tool orientation to more foundational ideas that cross some of the current boundaries that we're in.
Yeah, and we emphasize at the college three fundamental aspects to the education with varying technical levels, namely being computer science, operating systems, and networking. Across every application of cybersecurity, there is some element of knowledge that is going to be required in those fields. Whether you're doing it from a criminal justice side, whether you're doing it from your everyday system administrator side, whether you're doing it from the malware analyst, whatever, they're all going to need some level of understanding, whether it be very technical or less technical, of how do networks work, how do operating systems work across our varying devices, and how does code work. And that's something that's we certainly believe that that those are really the core parts of cybersecurity to us. And this is where my previous kind of, I don't know if it's a criticism or just observation, kind of comes from, where many organizations might focus on one of those. Many organizations might focus on all of them. Mm-hmm. Is there a balance between them, or are some simply ignored altogether, saying that's not cybersecurity, that's something else? Mm-hmm. In other words, that's just not what we do there, and that's how they can get away with that, in the sense that there is enough technical material, or there is enough content in any one of those given fields that I just listed, that you certainly could fill up an entire bachelor degree with content. But are you then kind of missing some of the important pieces to the pie if I've only shown you one of these things and we never touched on coding? We never touched on fundamental design concepts, maybe not even touching any development, but still understanding what happens in those arenas. I don't think that can be ignored. And I've seen many organizations or programs that they definitely don't touch it on it to the level that they should be.
So do you think you guys both related the field of cybersecurity to law and the medical field? So are you thinking maybe it should be more like a pre-law, pre-med, having that undergrad basis, and then like kind of restructuring the expectations of what a graduate should have? So not just having a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree and being ready to work, but having that undergraduate degree just be the launching point for your specialization that you would learn in a graduate field.
I think it would be nice to think of it that way, but the reality of the situation is that given the need for cybersecurity professionals kind of outstrips our possible longer-term evolution to that sort of a situation, because we do need, if you talk to folks over the last 2 or 3 years, the largest gap in being able to do cyber is having people that do cyber. It's not the tool limitations necessary, it's the people. So that in itself is historical manifestations. When I was younger and growing up, we had Radio Shack Trash 80s. We could pull apart boxes and stick cards in and see what they did, and the programming languages were very simple. Easy to handle, basic Fortran. You know what those 2 lines of code did. If they failed, it was that line versus the other line. And it was not until, or that was the preface of when you got to the baccalaureate level. You had played with computers, you had tried things and seen them break, you'd done a lot of things. You had the experiential componentry kind of given to you. It was expected. It was exciting, that you do it with your family, with your dad, with your mom, whatever. So part of the difficulty is there's the gap between the expectation of what you should hit the baccalaureate level with, in terms of there's a larger gap in the, folks are used to using devices. Look at a screen, look at a tablet, look at a laptop, and use it to do all sorts of fantastic things. But don't look behind it. It says if I push this button, magic is going to happen, but the magic is somewhere behind, far away, and I don't know what it does, but it does what I want it to, so I'll keep doing it. So there's an expectation, there's a lower expectation of the skill set to hit the baccalaureate level running. And because cybersecurity is so dynamic, at the graduation level at the baccalaureate degree, there's a high expectation to know what's current, what's valid, what do the tools do, what are the bad guys doing, how are we going to do things, that kind of thing. So it's the crunch on primarily the baccalaureate degree. And many of the graduate degrees, I think if you look around carefully, you'll find that folks that do graduate work in cybersecurity tend to spend a reasonable amount of their time learning about cybersecurity so that they can get the graduate level thing going. So there's the strictly baccalaureate education, that's hard. The evolution of the career field, we're still also trying to find out where the niches are that we can create the not a full registered nurse, but a practitioner that knows these things and can productively work in an environment, those little niches that people need to have. So it's exciting because, on the other hand, what's available today, if you look at the STEM programs in particular, which you're involved with, a lot of those kind of things. Hackathons are great because people are excited about them. And something as, I'll say simple, as drones coming on. Now, a drone has a camera, but you got a radio link, and you got to know video, and you got to know the radio, and you got to know the kind of things it does. And Raspberry Pi, Arduinos, BeagleBones, those kind of things, relatively inexpensive. On the European side, the microbit, and there's all those kinds of things that are going on that kids are getting more interested. And maybe that's the curve coming up to improve that approach when you get to the baccalaureate level. So there's exciting things going on, but it's still maturing. I guess that's the basic thing for me.
Yeah, and I think you touched on 2 really important points I would want to reemphasize. We've certainly framed the question of what do we do at the college level, but the reality is that if you only look at what's happening at cybersecurity at the college level, I think we're already too late. We're already way behind the ball in terms of the efforts we need to be making. And we have seen this at the college where we continue to start pushing cybersecurity education down to the high schools to try to get them more on the same level for when they come into the program, or to find those students to whom are passionate about this and they don't even know it yet.
Right.
And that's where hackathons and cybersecurity summer camps have really, really played a big role in that. But also pushing it down even lower, pushing it down to the middle schools, pushing it down to the first couple grades. And I certainly remember, I'm assuming all 3 of us have a slightly different high school or middle school education of what we remember. But I certainly remember if we had, the generic question of where do the kids to whom have a brain for things, where do they go? And I certainly remember the pressure was, you go to be a doctor, you go to be a lawyer, you go to be an engineer. If you want to get yourself knee deep in something that is technical, those are the places that you really go. Maybe computer science, maybe, and that was about the closest that you might get to something cybersecurity today. And I think the general awareness at the lower levels is something that can be a place where we can improve quite a bit upon to spark that interest sooner. I'm always stressing in my introductory classes for cyber that if you don't like this technical stuff, that's okay. There certainly are, and that's why I'm relating it very often to the medical field. There are, cybersecurity is very, very wide. And if there is a particular piece that you don't want to focus on, I'm sure that there's something else still in this field to which being aware of the coding is good, but that doesn't mean you have to become an expert in coding to enter this field and be productive and find something that you're passionate about. The other point that he brought up was the academics. How, as with the medical field, I have these kind of accepted what is a nurse practitioner, what is, and we have all the different levels, and so it makes it very easy as an academic to say, here's my goal. And if I go to another institution, the goal's the same.
It's similar.
And I can build an academic program to meet that particular framework. And we don't have that in cybersecurity. The closest thing that we have to really tie together other organizations, for the most part, we've seen has been certifications. Mm-hmm. Certifications are one of the only things that I could get it at one college. I could go to another college and it was given by a neutral third party. Maybe there's transfer credit, of course, but really it's the certifications that we've seen to say, well, what type of certifications do you incorporate or build your program around? Mm-hmm. But now we're kind of back to Michael's point of, we're learning to push buttons. We're learning to do a specific thing. I'm not learning about larger scale cybersecurity concepts that are transferable to going forward to when this button doesn't exist anymore. I just remember a lecture I had this past week of was talking about a particular technology and said, by the time you graduate, do you think this technology is still going to be around? It's in everyone's pocket right now, but is it still going to even look like this? Right. What are the connections we're even going to have? So learning about some of those technical things is just not quite as transferable. And I do think it's academics have their work cut out for them in this particular case, because they're not quite agile enough to move as fast as cybersecurity demands. Yeah. And it falls into that pitfall of let's go for certifications and make that the only thing that we care about because it's nice checkboxes along the way. So it's a very difficult part or position to be in for academics.
And academics also have it hard because in the cybersecurity area, as opposed to medical or law or some other defined career field that is more defined career field, there's an expectation that you're going to be right on the tip. You will know when you get out, you're absolutely current. If you look at a lot of the curricula around for cybersecurity, it is based on ancient cybersecurity things that happen. There are still people that are doing, 802.11g web hacking as a cybersecurity concept course and say, look, you broke into this thing that no longer exists. Or you now, let's turn off the stack randomization and now see how this thing works. But it doesn't work anymore because we have stack randomization. Yeah. So, and there's a hesitation a little bit, I think, in general in the community of saying, well, we don't want to spill all of the absolutely current, things that can go wrong to high school, college folks right away. We have to have that foundational ability to say, this is what happened, this is why, this is how you remediate it, and this is the lesson, and now I know you learned the lesson, which is a true statement. But is that utilitarian in a dynamic domain like cyber, where you have to know something beyond that? Because ultimately, it's not necessarily, there are foundational ideas, but ultimately, what a cybersecurity professional is trying to do is figure out what person is doing on the other side, not the tool, not the computer. It's still person to person, transiting tools and techniques and programming and things like that. So it's not as straightforward as mechanical engineering or electrical engineering. You're trying to figure out people to people. I want to do something bad to you. You can't stop me. Yes, I can. Which is the real question to answer. Versus is this rod able to stand a certain amount of torsion, and there's a number for that. So that's part of the challenge. Mm-hmm.
So part of those quantifiable methods and metrics, they really depend on the technology that you're using, what variants of that technology, what vendor, and stuff like that. So having all these disparate sorts of tools in the field. It's not like it's the medical field where you can have your liver is your liver, and it's something that works that way. And whereas a firewall can have 100 different versions in the realm of cybersecurity or what have you.
Right.
So what do you guys think that universities can do? Like, what are some steps looking forward that universities can take in order to improve their cybersecurity programs to have a better, well-defined definition, well-defined version of their cybersecurity programs?
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard work. It's definitely hard work, because the first delineation that you're going to have to start making some choices on is, what do you teach and what do you not teach, both in terms of the era of the concepts you're teaching. What do you leave behind? What do you make assumptions for, which is making sure you have an incoming cohort that has the skill set that you might need. You have to figure out what that line is, and then not teach what you don't need to, because on the higher end, there's more and more stuff to teach. So there's hard work involved in just that thought process and experimentation. And then it's the combination of the experiential and the conceptual. Not, tools are great. And that's where we tend, like you're saying, certifications and tools are where the focus is now. It's kind of being emphasized more and more because it's kind of easier to teach. And it does, and it gets you to the 80-85% waterline. You got to be the smarter cyber offensive person to figure out some of the things that are already in place today to get around them. But the other side of it is, what foundational cyber concepts, computer science primarily, should be embedded in more of the courses. And I think we see that happening, like you're saying. The curricula is getting better. It's just, you need to make conscious choices, and then there's some experimentation involved, which doesn't happen fast. Academics don't. It's not an agile. You've got an agile technology with a not as agile education process system. Yeah.
And that would be the number one thing that I would stress is, I've certainly looked at the courses I've taught over the years and said, compare it one semester to the next. It's not the same.
Yeah.
I have a baseline. My academic objectives, if I went to my dean and said, yes, I'd like to update the academic objectives of this course that I just taught last semester, and then I did it again next semester, and next semester, he would start to scratch his head and say, what's going on? Are we not, are you making mistakes every semester or what? Yeah. And so we need to understand that objectives can be general enough so that they don't have to be changed semester to semester, but that doesn't mean that the material can be static. It will be stagnant, because as Michael was stressing here, there is a very significant human element to this. It is, what are the techniques that are being used, and the media changes. The device that I have, the operating system that's on my phone versus what's running on my computer. I mean, that changes most certainly by the time someone graduates. Yeah. That whatever you started with, it's not going to be the same by the time that person gets through the program. And so realizing that that needs to be a necessary part of the education, but not the focus of the education, is very difficult. It's very difficult for an academic to say, I'm going to learn about a particular system or a particular type of technology, but not make that technology the focus of the education. I've seen a lot of this too, as far as textbooks. Even just having relevant material to pull from. A lot of the higher end classes we have, there's no textbook for this, because by the time the textbook is written, it's where's the relevant. We don't have this operating system anymore. We don't have this tool is nice, but it's not the cutting edge tool anymore.
They almost have to write the book before the tool even comes out.
Exactly. So
relevant.
Yep.
So that's something that I think is a really big issue. The other big issue here that we have for academics, I would again bring up the pre-college level to say, how do we baseline? What type of people do we have coming into college? And I would stress there that we have seen efforts being made recently to have trained cybersecurity professionals teaching in the high school, but that is in very specific places. That definitely is not across the board. When you think across the board, I mean, we all had a math teacher. We all had an English teacher. I would say most of us probably had some type of shop teacher or business. But do we have someone to whom is a cybersecurity professional? Things that we've seen here in the local area has been, it's the math guy who was passionate about computers. This is now your job. Or it's the English person to whom was passionate about computer. This is now your job to do this. And they have maybe a club. So very few places have that dedicated baseline. And so creating that baseline to begin with, it's not there. It certainly is not there yet.
That kind of leads me to my next question, which was, so the faculty that are involved in cybersecurity education, what types of backgrounds would be most conducive to having, like preparing either high school and undergraduates the best? So like a faculty member with a math background or a cybersecurity background. And do you see cybersecurity professionals having like a computer science education degree type of thing where, like you're saying, a math teacher, like we don't have a computer science teacher. Do you foresee that becoming an actual degree and profession, being the education of computer science?
You mean at the high school level?
School, or, well, it being a degree to yes, teach in high school.
Let's
use that as an example,
So I think most of what we have for high school right now, I don't think we're going to see a degree that says this is how you can teach computer science at the high school level, simply from a maturity process. We are nowhere near that level.
We can't grow them fast enough.
Exactly.
There are a lot of programs that are, I'll call it secondary educational projects, to take a cohort of teachers from a school or from a school district and say, here's things you need to know about cyber. There's lots of those programs going on. And the Air Force Research Lab has had one ongoing for years where they say, we want teachers that are who have been tasked to teach cyber to know more about cyber so they can do better at, making a better product. Let's make the recipe better so that what comes out is better. So there's lots of those things going on, which is very positive. But I think James is right. I don't think it's going to be a teach teachers how to teach cyber. I don't think there's going to be that definitive thing. It's teach teachers how to understand more about it and get them more involved. And as they mature, it's a hard thing to get a handle on. And it's going to be a more general population, because you have to decide. We've been kind of focusing on baccalaureate and the feeders to the baccalaureate and graduate arenas, but in reality, the whole cyber, what's the largest threat nowadays? That you've got a lot more tools and a lot more automated things going on. What's current? Phishing is the big thing. You still need one person to do something wrong, and then that causes the avalanche of the other things that come after, because they were just looking for the one little nit to happen. So there's a difference in the due diligence education, how the cybersecurity concepts kind of spread over general curricula, and then the specific cybersecurity training that says this is about specific security things you need to know about concept-wise and some tool-wise, so you can help kids understand. So it's challenging.
And I would add in, though, that we have, through one of our summer camps at the college, seen that even the English teacher who shows up and is interested can make a difference to where there is currently no education, no cyber education being done at the college. So I would just want to say, yes, there's a lot of work there. Yes, that is a very immature state that we're in as far as at the high school level. But I wouldn't want that to be a discouraging factor for someone to whom says, can I make a difference locally? The level of knowledge that the fourth grader needs is obviously does not require a master's in cybersecurity to get them fundamental stuff. And that's where I would stress that the colleges can help out a lot in this particular area, or the professionals, to say, what are the things that the fourth grader needs to learn? Okay, what are the things the ninth grader needs to learn? What are the things the 12th grader needs to learn? So then by the time they start applying and get involved at the college level, that they have this fundamental. This has been something I know I've mentioned for other majors on the peripheral, whether it be engineering or computer science or something else, that we don't live in a world today where you can ignore cyber anymore. I don't care what industry you end up with, how many people are sitting behind a computer. And as Michael correctly identified, we're all going to be the target of a phishing attack at some point, and in many industries, multiple times a month. They're very, very common. And so it needs to be the water we all swim in as far as the mentality that we have. And so that's something that, from a mentality point of view, absolutely lots of that could be done at a much, much younger age. And it would be a lot easier to do when we're younger than introducing these concepts when someone is, well, I've seen many of the students that come in as freshmen and they're going, well, I haven't done that my whole life. And nothing, I'm still here. So why should I start changing my behavior now? You can change the behavior and have the mentality at a younger age, and it would actually be more effective to have that. So that's something that I definitely would emphasize as something that should happen in terms of cyber education before they get to college. And there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yep.
So let's just flip that from faculty to students. What can students do to better prepare themselves or compensate for the lack of cybersecurity education in their area or in their programs? What would be, whether it be outside of their degrees or inside of their collegiate or high school programs, what can they do to best get?
Almost anything. These days, there are tremendous resources available. All of the Coursera, edX, all of them have all of the available courses that you can take online for free. The online programming home pages where you can do Scratch programming. MIT's Scratch programming has been great for folks. There's Europe, I think, might be ahead of the U.S. in terms of involving younger kids doing specific project-based things. The microbit was about the same era as the Raspberry Pi, but the smaller electronics that you can fiddle with and understand, gosh, I put this and this and this together and I made that happen. And then you can start to reason about what's going on behind the scenes. Difficulty is understanding what that complexity is behind the scenes in a gradual enough way that it doesn't completely scare you to death. If you take somebody into a data center and say, this is a server and look at all these things that are going on, it's not the same as saying, yeah, I can make this camera work. I can make the light go off. I can tell Alexa, I can, with if this then that, if the IFTT protocol and a little Raspberry Pi and, a minimal combination of dollars and resources, you can tell Alexa to do all sorts of things. So it's available. It's getting people aware and excited and saying, wouldn't it be cool if you could do that? And then just help them do it.
Yeah, I would definitely reemphasize the resources available to people, and for the most part, it's people are simply unaware. They don't know what resources are available at their fingertips. I would absolutely reinforce that at the college level. As soon as college is here, you mean I could partner and do something with someone at a high school? Those are real buzzwords as far as trying to have students more prepared, because colleges are going to look and say, hey, if I can get involved with a kid at the high school, they're more likely to attend my college. And that's something that there absolutely is a big push there at the college level, just because it's natural for them from a marketing point of view, let's say. But also I would reemphasize that the internet as a resource, as a tool. I often say in my classes, I'm not teaching you anything you couldn't find on the internet in terms of education. And so, and with these cheap devices that we now have readily available on Amazon, you really are, you need to just find something you're passionate about and go with it. That's really the hard part for a student to say, you mean I can do that? I didn't know that. The teacher didn't say I was supposed to go be passionate and find something to do. And so they still at that age, they have that mentality. Until somebody shows me something to be passionate about, I didn't realize that was the rules. And many of them, the light bulb starts to go off as they get through college. Some of them maybe a little bit later too. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that was what I had to do. So that, I think, again, that's really not unique to cybersecurity. That's really just kids in general. But being able to create an environment where that happens is really the best thing for getting the professional who comes out the door who's passionate and is competent in the field. So
and it's also dependent on the culture and the climate and the people and the age of the kids and how they fit into the social environment. The next generation engineering education study MIT just put out, I think just last week, was saying that the novel things that are happening in engineering education that are improving the state of the art are programs where they're emphasizing the combination of the educational material, the social responsibility, and passion about a goal into a whole. That's part of what you do. You don't necessarily have a course whose goal is to write a 15-page paper. The course's goal is to find out somebody that needs help and then work with them to find something that's within your realm of burgeoning expertise and build something for them, whether it's an educational thing or a specific tool or a particular software product. And that's where the true innovation comes, is when you get people passionate and you make that combination of that passion along with this skill you're developing will help you do this or this or this. I think I have a personal observation as the 4 or 5 decades that I've seen of things go through, that there was a pretty good length of time when the emphasis on engineering education was get a patent, build something that's yours, become famous, make a lot of money, those kinds of things. I saw that evolution of the billboards in the schools go from graduate education to innovation and start your own business and things like that. And it's starting to come around the other side now, where it's more about solving problems and being a community and trying to do things together. So I would like to think that that's maybe what's coming up, but that'll also make a big change.
Well, okay. I think that covers the questions that I have. I think that's a good overall kind of perspective on the current state of cybersecurity education and kind of where it's heading and what universities and students can do to really further their own education. Thank you both for your input and for being here.
Well,
today.
thank you. That was lots of fun.
Of course.